Hello, everybody. Welcome into podcast number 5 for Strange Appalachia. This is JD Lawson, and as always, Charlie's here with me. And this week we want to talk sort of further in depth about what we started last week, which was the Bigfoot phenomenon. We talked about Bigfoot last week as a physical being, that flesh and blood ape, or some sort of a um, misidentification of a bear or something to that effect. And this week, what we want to talk about is more of the spiritual or the paranormal side of what the Bigfoot phenomenon has to offer. So, Charlie, start us out there.
Yeah, so there's a part of the Bigfoot community that believes that the Sasquatch is not a physical being, but it's something more of a spiritual being, something that could be even an alien. I mean, you hear all kinds of accounts of Bigfoot being sighted in and around UFOs. We're in UFO hotspots. You also some of the things that are common in the accounts are things like a blue light. Sometimes the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch will explode into a blue light. Sometimes it's a blue light that's just seen around the creature. And so, because of reports like this, some people believe that Bigfoot is more of a spirit than a physical creature. And if it is, then that would explain why we have such a hard time finding them, taking pictures of them, not finding a body because there wouldn't be a body. Um, some of the stuff that support this actually are Native American legends. The Cherokee legend tells of a creature called Solo Kulu. He is actually almost human. He's a large, almost a deity of the forest that is the owner of the forest. It's said that he owns all the game. He provides for people, and he took up a bride. And there's a lot of mystical things that are associated with him.
So, before we get too deep into this, I do want to give sort of a note that what we're going to be doing in this episode is sort of just brushing the surface of the paranormal Bigfoot, of the Bigfoot as a spiritual being and stuff like that. If you want a more in depth look at this, we're going to give a plug here for our buddy Bill, uh, of Bill Co Productions. He has a movie called Paranormal Bigfoot, and it does a very excellent job of showing the paranormal Bigfoot versus the physical flesh and blood Bigfoot, and getting people who are widely considered experts from both sides of that argument and putting them next to one another and sort of letting you decide what you think the truth to be.
Yeah, we see it. We see it. When you interview people, Bigfoot's already kind of a taboo subject, and it's becoming less so here lately. More and more people are becoming more and more accepting that the fact that there could be something out there. But when you add in the spiritual side or the paranormal side to it, people that want to talk about that, they don't tend to come forward with it. If they have an experience like that, they tend to not come forward with it.
It's definitely something that's difficult to wrap the mind around. I don't prescribe to any of the paranormal Bigfoot beliefs. Just throwing that out there. But just like with some of the other stories we've done that we may not necessarily think is a true story or the exact explanation, it's a good story nonetheless. So it's something that's worth talking about. It's worth throwing out. I just don't personally believe that Bigfoot is a paranormal entity if it exists at all.
Yeah, I kind of ascribe to the same belief. I'm not sold on the fact that Bigfoot is something that could be something spiritual or a ghost, something like that. Especially, I don't believe it would be an alien of any type.
Yeah, I mean, heck, if we're going to be 100% honest, I don't fully know that I believe in that there's such a thing as a Bigfoot, much less that it's a spiritual being.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things, like I said before. Every time I start to doubt a story, something happens and suckers me back into it. And then
Right.
every time I start to really believe, something happens that pushes me away from it. So, I've seen both sides of the story. I've been on both sides of the story now. And I just keep going back and forth on it. I guess I'll have to see one to really believe it.
Yeah, that's sort of where I see it. You know, definitely all these are good stories, but need some evidence of something.
Yeah. So I want to talk real quick about Solo Kulu. I'll tell that legend real quick. It
Or
starts out with a young Indian maiden who is very eager to marry, and the Cherokee, they lived in cabins as much as they lived in tents. And she goes to her mother, who lives in the cabin, and her mother gives her a good piece of advice. And it's a piece of advice that all young women need to ascribe to, especially considering what was going on at the time. There were a lot of men in the tribe that were ready to marry, but they weren't ready to provide for a family. And so the maiden's mother tells her not to marry anyone that can't give them fish or deer. If they can't feed their family, then you shouldn't marry them. And so she looks around and can't find anybody that will meet those qualifications. None of the men that were willing to marry her were willing to hunt for her. And so her mother tells her to go sleep under the lean-to outside and wait to see if a man will come to you. And sure enough, that night a man comes to her, and he won't let her see what he looks like, but he does bring a deer. And so, qualification right there. He's got it. It's exactly what her mother told her. And so they become married. Well, this Solo Kulu wouldn't allow anyone to see what he looked like. He would only come at night, and he would always bring food, sometimes more than enough to feed the tribe. And eventually, the mother-in-law wants to see what her son-in-law looks like. And so he agrees to it, only under the condition that they won't laugh at him or make fun of him. And of course, when he comes out in the light, he's large, he's hairy, he's covered in hair from head to toe, and he's ugly. And the mother-in-law laughs, and so he leaves. Well, that night, the daughter, um, it says that she begins to menstruate, and so she goes to the river to clean herself up. And Solo Kulu comes to her and asks what she's doing, and he tells her, or she tells him what's happening. And he said, "You've left the baby in the river." He goes and retrieves the rags that she cleaned herself up with, and lo and behold, there's a child in them. And the child grows quickly over the next few days to become from an infant to a toddler and then to a small child in a matter of days. And Solo Kulu takes his wife and his child, and they leave the village. Um, he tells the mother-in-law that he's leaving specifically because of her. So there's a weird vibe to the story right there, but it is a Native American legend. A lot of the stuff that we take from it, I'm sure we lose culturally. But getting back to the story, Solo Kulu uh, then tells the mother-in-law, "I will continue to provide food for you because I own the game," meaning he owns all the prey animals in the forest. And a few months pass, and the young maiden's brother comes and says, "I want to see my sister." And the mother tells her son what happened. And he said, "Well, I'm going to track them." So he does. He tracks them into the mountains. And when he gets into the mountains, he he finds where they camped, and then he finds an extra set of footprints. It goes from 3 to 4, and it's assumed that they have another child. And of course, this child, according to the footprints the man's tracking, grows quickly as well. And he continues to follow them to the top of a mountain, and he finds a rock range that he can't pass over, but he can look through the cracks and see what he describes as another tribe of large, hairy individuals, and they're basically dancing. And he sees his sister, and he calls to her, and she can climb down the rocks, but he can't climb up the rocks. And she says, "I'll live with my husband now. Here's your nieces and nephews." He sees that they're strong, and then Solo Kulu communicates with not only him but the rest of the tribe mentally. It's mind speak is what they call it, and it's something that's still associated with Bigfoot today. And he tells them all that not to come look for me again. I'll continue to watch over and protect your tribe, but you all aren't allowed up here. And so apparently the son and the mother honored that and no longer went to bother their daughter anymore, but they were provided for. They were given meat and corn and fish almost as a tribute. And they continued to take tobacco into the forest to give back to Solo Kulu. Of course, he took it willingly. So there's a lot of mysticism and mythical things going on in that story.
Yeah, the mind speak is definitely something that you see a lot in different stories associated with Bigfoot. So that's definitely something that's weird.
Yeah, I find it weird that he was able to pass through the forest in places that normal people couldn't. That's also something that's attributed to Bigfoot.
Right. There's a lot of those supernatural things. You mentioned the blue light. Something else, another story that we sort of have personal experience with is, or you at least specifically, is the reports of a group of women talking somewhere near Bigfoot.
Yeah,
Um,
that's supposedly how their language sounds. It's like women talking, cackling and laughing. And I've been in the forest and I've heard that before.
yeah, and then the wood knocking as well would go along with that, which we heard that night as well.
Yeah, and it's not something that that's not really something that's paranormal, but it is a sign that's attributed to Bigfoot. So
Right.
another story that is a Cherokee legend that's attributed to Solo Kulu is he was also known to leap from mountaintop to mountaintop. He actually, a lot of stories have him as a cannibal. He would eat people, and once you get those stories involved, you also get into red-haired giants. If you've not ever researched that kind of stuff, there's supposedly a legend of red-headed giants with two rows of teeth. Those things are, I believe, to be separate from Bigfoot. It's a different story, but you get some overlap there too.
Okay. I'd heard that legend before, but not looked into it very much.
It's pretty interesting. It's I think the red-headed giants are more interesting than the Bigfoot stuff. Actually, that might be something to talk about later on.
Absolutely. Well, anything else you want to throw out on the paranormal Bigfoot?
Not really. There's a lot to it, like we talked about earlier. So if anybody out there wants to start digging up information on it, you'll find uh, a multitude of resources and sites online. You'll find that it tends to be more of a Western thing, more
That's
out
what I was
west, and
just about to say.
yeah, and something you'll find more up north into Canada. Um, you'll hear people talking about portals. Supposedly, Bigfoot will come and go through portals. Um, you'll hear people talking about uh, how they've seen Sasquatch come out of UFOs. It gets really really bizarre. Um,
Yeah, I read a theory earlier that a gentleman somewhere out west put out that basically said that Bigfoots were the aliens that whatever the alien races that are observing Earth are, the Bigfoot is the one that blends in the best with humanoid culture, that's not going to freak us out the most. So they send them down basically as spies, and they gather information and go back and share it with the other aliens. So I mean,
yeah, it gets truly bizarre. I mean, there's even people that use biblical accounts and attribute those to Bigfoot, that they're some kind of a half breed angel because of the books in the Bible that talk about the giants, the Nephilim and the Rephilim, that are supposedly half breeds, half angel, half human. And these creatures are supposed to be giants in the Bible. That's a whole other topic. We can talk about the Nephilim all day long. Um, but you have those stories that are attributed to Bigfoot. Some of the Native American beliefs actually say that the reason you have a physical and a spiritual version of the same thing is that the forest is like a heaven for them. And when they die, their spirit goes into the forest. And so you'd have a physical creature, and then it would die, and then it would become a more of a paranormal or a supernatural creature.
yeah, and that's we've talked about this before of how that's human culture trying to attribute the things they're seeing, and make it make sense on both a spiritual and a physical level. And I think a lot of times, and we've had this discussion before as well, a lot of times what it could boil down to is something as simple as, a person goes out in the woods and says, all right, I'm going to find Bigfoot today. And something, out of the ordinary happens to them, or something that doesn't happen very often happens, and they automatically, instead of looking for a logical reason for that thing happening, they're automatically like, all right, this is Bigfoot. Now, how could Bigfoot have made this happen? And you get these wild, sort of off the wall stories, but in a roundabout way, those stories make sense because they're explaining something, that happened to them, just sort of throwing Bigfoot in. Maybe they were out in the woods and an acorn fell out of a tree or something, and they thought it was something throwing a rock at them. What could be throwing a rock at me? Bigfoot. Well, I looked around, I didn't see a Bigfoot, so he must have teleported off. Stuff like that could be happening in some of these. I'm not saying all of them, but some of these could, just be human mind trying to rationalize something.
Have you ever heard? Have you ever heard Les Stroud's account of Bigfoot using mind speak on him?
Yes.
That's pretty interesting when you got a guy like Les Stroud who is I mean, 10 times the outdoorsman I'll ever be. Who goes out and lives in the forest, and he's telling you that he had mind speak happen to him. So it's another one of those things, man. It just suckers me right back in trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that's one of the most convincing um, accounts that I've ever heard for the paranormal case of Bigfoot. If
Yeah, there's
anybody if anybody out there is unfamiliar, Les Stroud was the host of the Survivor Man TV show.
yeah, he would live by himself in the woods. The TV show had it 7 days at a time, but he's done it a lot longer on his own. Both before and after the show. So I mean, he's got accounts of it, and I know I've met people that believe in the paranormal Bigfoot, and I don't really want to discredit them in any way because their belief is so passionate. They've had something happen to them that truly is something spiritual or something supernatural at the very least, and they're trying to explain it the best way they can.
Right.
When you got people starting to talk about seeing weird lights in the woods, which is something that's happened. I mean, I've seen weird lights in the woods before. You have as well.
Right.
You start trying to figure out what it is, and there are Bigfoot sign involved. I can see how you could really go that direction really quick.
And again, we've talked about this as well, again for the third time. Um, we talk about, both of us would pretty well tell you that we don't believe in the whole paranormal aspect of Bigfoot, but in camping, we've experienced most of those signs that people talk about. The whispering, the wood knocking, the strange lights, the cackling, stuff like that. And it's, all stuff that's happened to us, but yet we still don't put that forward as our main belief.
No, no, I think it would take something something like a Bigfoot coming down and telling me before I would truly believe it.
Right.
So, all right, you want to talk about the investigation this week, some?
Yeah, sure. This past weekend, we went up to the area that we called the Three Fields, and we had, had this plan for a while to go up and do this investigation. And so, we went up there. It was a pretty day. I got to spend about 3 or 4 hours out in the woods, walking around looking at signs. And we really came across a lot of cool stuff, mostly animal sign, coyote, deer, and bear mainly. And, unfortunately, we didn't really have anything strange to report. We recorded enough video to make a decent investigation episode, talk about some of our methods, how we track things, what we look for. and we got back and started to put the video together, and the audio didn't work. When we checked it out in the field on Charlie's phone, the audio sounded great. It was exactly what we wanted, and we got back and we downloaded it to the computer. And the best description I can give you for how the audio sounded is if you go to whatever fast food restaurant has the absolute worst speaker system for their drive-through that you can imagine, it sounded like we were talking through that.
Yeah, it's funny because it still sounds good on my phone, and there's no way to transfer it from my phone to a computer and have any type of quality on the sound, which is strange in and of itself.
Yeah, we definitely, really disheartened over that. Charlie posted a picture on the Facebook page of a print that we found, and it's the best print we found all day, and it's about 10 inches long. It's got the toes at the top of it. Definitely looks like a humanoid foot. And what we basically determined is it was a bear double step. Either front paw, and then later on it came back and another front paw in that same area, or a front and back paw as it was walking through, and it just happened to be in that shape. And the reason we think that is there's, like I said, there's bear sign all over up there. There was one bear that was less than 3 or 4 hours in front of us. We found fresh scat, fresh prints, not only in mud but in dirt, or sand. It definitely would have, eroded away if it had been there for any amount of time. So that was definitely a cool experience, and one that had us as worried as it did excited. And that here was this bear that couldn't have been very far in front of us at all. So that was an interesting experience. But again, other than some really cool bear sign, nothing exceptional to report.
Nope. We'll try it again.
Yeah. Anything else you want to throw in, or you want to close it here?
Let's close it out, man.
All right. Well, as always, I want to encourage everybody, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. If you've got any questions, either leave it in the comments or shoot us a message. We'll be more than happy to talk about things. And we've got some cool stuff planned coming up, or what we think is cool stuff. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, everybody take it easy.